There are 5 players that I expect to be jumping up rankings throughout the 2025 college football season. Whether you are a dynasty, Devi, campus to Ken, or college fantasy football player, you're going to want to know these 5 guys. All right, I am in the midst of my summer scouting process. I've got 27 players with evaluations, and there were 4 guys that really jumped out to me throughout the film watching process. I'm excited to bring them to you and break those players down. I've also got a true freshman that I'm really excited about. So the other 4 guys, they are 2026 eligible, but I wanted to throw in one deeper name as well. But let's go ahead. Let's start with a 2026 wide receiver who really impressed me, and that is USC's Jakobi Lane. Now, of course, I'll also be keeping a close eye on wide receiver Makai Lemon out of USC, but I do think he's getting a little bit more chatter. So I wanted to highlight Jakobi Lane. He's 6'4", 195 pounds. He's got a great frame. Sometimes you see a guy listed 6'4", and you're like, this guy's definitely 6'2.5". I think Jakobi Lane is 6'3.5" at least. He's definitely that built-out profile. Really understated production in the USC offense last year. He had 42 receptions for 525 yards. But what gets me excited, 12 touchdowns for Jakobi Lane last season. And he certainly did have some multi-touchdown games. He showed out in the bowl game. That definitely helped pad that stat. But nonetheless, first full season as a starter, and he's got 12 receiving touchdowns with that frame. That's checking a lot of boxes right off the bat. But watching his film, you get even more excited about the big man. He wins position consistently. A guy with a big frame does not always know how to use it. Jakobi Lane knows how to use it. He's comfortable winning in traffic. I love his mental concentration in contested situations. Although Lane is a big-bodied wide receiver, and I know I've said that multiple times, he doesn't just rely on his physicality. It's his handwork as well. He's able to separate before the catch point, although I do think he can improve a little bit on that, but he does show the ability at times to separate before the catch point, and he's going to pair it with pretty good athleticism and pretty good quickness relative to his size. Now, Jakobi Lane, he's not a fully polished product, and that's why I think he's going to be really moving up draft boards. If the NFL draft happens today, probably a late day 2 pick just based on projection. He gets a little bit more control over his body movements. He really kind of improves, shows a little bit more technicality in his route running, and is able to better utilize his vertical ability consistently. Then I think Jakobi Lane is going to be potentially a top 50 NFL draft pick. He's definitely somebody who I'm going to be watching closely. Now, there's another player here who has been getting a lot of chatter from especially the college fantasy football beat, a little bit from the Devi beat, but let's talk about the Indiana quarterback, Fernando Mendoza, formerly of Cal. He's had 1 full season as a starter, and he did pretty well relative to what he had to work with around him in a really poor Cal offense. When I watched the Fernando Mendoza tape, I saw a player with a strong arm. He's got great velocity, especially through the midfield. I mean, he can really fire that ball on a tightrope through the midfield. Mendoza's a confident passer, all right? And that can feel like a very vague term, but it's not. When I see player or passers that are confident, that really jumps out to me. He's got good anticipation over the middle of the field. It's one thing to have good accuracy stats, but when you are accurate, you have good timing, you have good anticipation, specifically over the middle of the field, that's something I'm looking for in my quarterback prospects. He's got good pocket awareness. He's definitely a pocket passer. He's comfortable in the pocket. He feels pressure well. He's able to step up and through the pocket, and he's got a solid mechanical foundation, but I love his quick release. That really jumps out to me. For a guy who's 6'5", 225, oftentimes those big man quarterbacks could naturally, as you expect, have really elongated throwing motions. I think relative to his size, Mendoza has a pretty solid throwing motion, but that release at the end of it really helps kind of make it a fast one and really kind of a highlight of his game. Now, I do think there's things we're going to want to see improvement from, And that's why he's kind of on the radar now, but not in that forefront of the conversation. We want to see more mobility from Fernando Mendoza, right? Especially from a fantasy perspective. All right, it's all well and good to get excited about a pocket passer, especially one that could potentially go in the first round, which I think Fernando Mendoza realistically could. But if there's not some level of mobility that's proven, that's really going to make it tough to project him as even a top 15 fantasy quarterback in his first year, which could really help his ceiling or his overall fantasy projection, right? His fantasy value, which of course is the main goal of everything that I'm doing here. I'm looking at realistic fantasy value. I also think in the Cal offense here, you saw a lot of quick reads, quick checkdowns, early RPO stuff. You didn't really get to see Fernando Mendoza work to that second, third progression. I don't knock Fernando Mendoza for that. I think that's just what Cal was working with. That's what the offensive line was working with. I think he's going to have a little bit more opportunity to do that. And the Indiana offense, we've looked at Curt Cignetti, who is the head coach at Indiana, his ability to develop, mentor, and kind of get those quarterbacks to the next level. He's got a proven track record of that. We saw what he was able to do last year with Curtis Rourke, who was playing injured for the entire season, still looked really good, still went day 3 of the NFL draft, despite the fact that going into last season, he had 0 NFL draft prospects. So there's a really prime opportunity for Fernando Mendoza heading into this season. The header here, the next Michael Penix, that's not just an exaggeration. I think Fernando Mendoza realistically could have a Michael Penix-like rise. If you remember going into his senior campaign at Washington, Penix certainly had some NFL draft hype, but nobody believed he'd be a top 10 pick. And I just think overall profile-wise, too, I mentioned a good pocket passer, struggles with mobility, struggles with progressions at times. You're seeing a lot of Michael Penix, although I will say Mendoza to me a little bit more of an accurate passer, 68% completion last year for Cal, over 3,000 yards, 16-6 touchdown interception ratio. Might not sound super exciting, but it's actually pretty impressive for, again, a quarterback in the Cal offense. So before I get into my next player, who will be the only non-2026 eligible player on the list, I just want to make sure folks know where they can see the full scouting reports that I'm reading off of as I'm going through these prospects that really jumped out to me in my summer scouting process. You can head on over to patreon.com/rookiebigboard, and the link will be in the episode description to see those full profiles. This year, I've introduced a new scouting notebook where you can go in and see a trait-by-trait breakdown, 20 traits broken down with quantitative and qualitative analysis for each of those players, strengths, weaknesses, film review summary, as well as, most importantly, the fantasy translation, fantasy impact. Those guys all get plugged in to my rankings, and then you can not only see the 2026 class rankings, you can compare that to how I've rated guys in the 2025 rookie class, as well as the rest of the Devy players, Dynasty players. They're all graded out on the same scale, so you can directly compare a 2026 prospect with a freshman in college with a 10-year NFL vet. Again, patreon.com/rookiebigboard to get access to that. Link will be in the episode description. So I recently wrote an article for the Rookie Big Board newsletter over at rookiebigboard.com. That's completely free. Also will be in the episode description, and you could check that article out as well, where I broke down my full process for how to identify players who are going to break out as freshmen in college. It's so difficult to identify these guys, right? Of course, you've got your 5-star guys, and it's easy to just kind of follow the recruiting rankings. But if you're drafting a guy with a high recruiting ranking in your Devy drafts, you got to spend up. You got to use some prime draft capital. And I'm not willing to do that blindly or just off of industry evaluation, right? I'm looking for a few things. And just to quickly summarize what the article breaks down in much more detail, I'm looking for a player who enrolls early. I want them to take advantage of that spring camp if they're going to have the ability to produce early. And Gideon Davidson out of Clemson, he did enroll early. He participated fully in Clemson spring camp. And my goodness, did he get positive feedback. Head coach Dabo Sweeney has publicly backed Gideon Davidson consistently, talking about how he's physically impressive. And he's also been noted as saying that he is much further along in his progression than expected. Cade Klubnik, his starting quarterback, has compared him to Travis Etienne. Folks, that's a big deal. That's a big thing to say around the Clemson circles. He was directly comparing, Gideon Davidson's first step acceleration and his ability to cut to that of Travis Etienne. And what do we know about Travis Etienne, especially at the college level? Home run hitting potential. That's really fantastic. That's really exciting for a guy who hasn't even seen the field yet. What else am I looking for when I'm prioritizing a guy to draft in Devy leagues, an incoming freshman? I'm looking for immediate opportunity. And everything that I'm hearing from the Clemson beat is saying that Gideon Davidson is going to be in pole position to take over the Phil Maffa carries. Phil Maffa is vacating over 200 touches in this Clemson offense. And the next guys up in terms of returners, it's uninspiring. Those guys only have 83 combined touches. They weren't able to break through the rotation in the past. And the full expectation is that Gideon Davidson, the former high four-star recruit, he's the 5th overall running back in the 2025 recruiting class. The expectation is that Gideon Davidson is going to take over that backfield. He's going to be the lead back. I've been talking about him over the last week or so. I've been drafting him in my CFF seasonal drafts. I expect immediate contribution. I've been prioritizing him in Devy drafts. I'm all in on Gideon Davidson. And again, if you want to read that full article where I break down my whole process, I actually identify 10 other freshmen that I'm interested in. But let's go ahead. Let's get back to the 2025 class here. And if I was giving out superlatives, Eric Singleton Jr. would win my favorite film review of the summer. Folks, I've been doing this a little while now. We're on year 6 of a full all-in draft process evaluation, and I was doing it for a couple of years before I went all in on the rookie big board evaluation process. So let's say 7-8 years watching film, watching tape. It can get a little hard to impress me to get that, lean forward, jump out of your seat excitement. But Eric Singleton Jr. out of Auburn absolutely did that. In my head, I knew he was super productive at Georgia Tech, and I had certainly seen him play watching Georgia Tech live. It was actually a really fun offense to watch last year. But I didn't expect his ability to win at all 3 levels of the field. That's what got me really excited. So Eric Singleton Jr., he's 5'11", 190. He transferred from Georgia Tech to Auburn. So if you're not familiar, Georgia Tech offense, very run-focused offense, right? The quarterback runs, the running back runs. That's really the focus of the offense. And so Singleton Jr., 56 receptions, 750 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns. That's actually outstanding. Folks, it's really impressive. Again, if you're not familiar with the Georgia Tech offense, that's great. So now he transfers to Auburn, where he's going to have Jackson Arnold at quarterback, who we expect to take a big step forward in the Hugh Freeze offense, very passing-friendly offense, kind of spread them out, open things up. And so Eric Singleton Jr. will not only have a good quarterback and scheme, but he's got, I'll say, a top 10 safely wide receiver in the league, pulling coverage off of him on the outside in Cam Coleman. And that's not the end of the receiving room there. There's a few other good wide receivers in the Auburn offense. So there's a lot to like just in terms of full opportunity. And so that's kind of just your foundation. When I turned on the film for Eric Singleton Jr., I saw a speedy player. I saw a quick player. I saw an explosive athlete. That might sound repetitive, but it's not. Being speedy, being quick, and being explosive are 3 different things I'm looking for. It's rare for a player to hit all 3. Eric Singleton Jr. definitely hits all 3. What I really like about Singleton Jr. is he wins off the release. He can win with his first step. He wins at the bottom of his routes. He consistently separates within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, and he separates downfield. I mentioned I was surprised that he won at all 3 levels of the field. In my mind, Eric Singleton Jr., 5'11", 190, I thought he'd be a slot specialist, right? Wins over the middle of the field, wins his dig routes, wins his out routes, good short curls. No, he wins downfield. He's got a good post route, all right? He could really work the seam. I love his deep curl. I love his deep out. He could really do a lot at all 3 levels of the field. And so that's what really makes it kind of dynamic for me. excellent ball tracking. He's really able to adjust late. He's able to adjust high, adjust low. He outplays his frame. He outplays his frame in contested situations. He uses excellent vertical athleticism to help outplay that frame, but it's really his ability to extend his body, his ball tracking, his steady, reliable hands, and he's got excellent focus in traffic. He is not phased working over the middle of the field, and he's not phased working in contested catch situations. Now, I do have one more player here, but I'm sure there's other potential breakout candidates that you wanted to hear from me. Feel free to drop a comment. Let me know. I'll give you my thoughts on that player. I'll be brutally honest. If I'm high on him, if I'm low on him, or maybe I just haven't watched them yet. So I'll get back to you when I watch them. I mentioned I've got 27 summer scouting reports available to all the Rookie Big Board patrons. Probably get to about 40 or 45 before the season starts. So lots of players still to go. But one more player here, and this might be cheating a little bit. I think he kind of broke out last year, and I think folks know the name. But Jaden Greathouse, he could be the top receiver in next year's NFL draft class. And so that's why I'm counting him as a breakout, because I think he can rise up the rankings. He can certainly move up NFL draft boards. So let's get into the Fighting Irish wide receiver. 6'1", 215, and we do have some good proof of concept here. He had 42 receptions, 592 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Why I mentioned I think Jaden Greathouse might be a little bit more well-known is he put up a vast majority of that production in the college football playoff run for Notre Dame. So really when they were on the big stage and they needed to throw the ball more, Jaden Greathouse was the top guy. If you remember in that Riley Leonard offense throughout most of the season when they were playing a pretty weak schedule for Notre Dame for the most part, they were really prioritizing the run with Riley Leonard, the run with Jeremiah Love, and for good reasons, right? They were able to win that way. When they got to the end of the season, the competition got tougher. Those loaded boxes they weren't able to overwhelm. They needed to look downfield, and that's when Jaden Greathouse really shined. So this season, you might be saying, all right, well, what's gonna change, right? Well, Riley Leonard is off to the NFL. All expectations are that CJ Carr will be the starting quarterback. If not, it'll be Kenny Minchey. And Kenny Minchey's a little bit more of a dual threat, but certainly not Riley Leonard. CJ Carr, pocket passer, right? They're going to be looking to prioritize the downfield passing game. And I think Jaden Greathouse is going to be an instant connection for CJ Carr. Greathouse has reliable hands. He adjusts well late. First year starting quarterback in CJ Carr, you're going to want a wide receiver that's able to adjust, right? Even the most accurate quarterback coming in, he's going to throw high, he's going to throw low. Greathouse shows the ability to have a wide range in his catch frame. I love his ability to accelerate right off the snap. Gets to top speed quickly, and he's quick in short space. So he's got some good acceleration, and he's got some good quickness. It helps him win before and after the catch. I'm mentioning that he's a downfield threat. That's where his upside comes in, but he certainly has some yak potential as well. And I love his release. He shakes defenders off the release. I know I talked about that with Eric Singleton Jr. If you've been listening to me for any amount of time now, you know I love when my wide receivers win with that first step, win with their release, have that sharp handwork, are able to separate, win that first step. That goes far. But Greathouse is also able to shake guys through his routes, really make them bite. He uses his speed, but also just that route running technical ability. So Greathouse right now, I think he probably is a consensus top 5 wide receiver. So again, I'm cheating a little bit with the breakout term, but I think he has the potential to be wide receiver 1 in this 2026 wide receiver class. There's not been a lot of hype overall in the 2026 wide receiver class. And I understand there's no there's no necessarily locked in top 10 guy. There's no Teteroa McMillan. And if you're looking forward to next year, there's no Jeremiah Smith. But I do think this 2026 wide receiver class with some of the guys that I talked about, it's reminding me a lot of the 2023 class where we had, Addison and JSN and Quentin Johnston and Jaden Reed. And there was one more player in that run from 18 to 50. We had like 6 guys go off the board. I think that's where this 2026 wide receiver class could end up. And if you look at some of those guys I mentioned, especially the guys the Rookie Big Board liked, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Jordan Addison, Those guys are perennial, top 15, top 18 fantasy dynasty wide receivers at this point in time. So that's a pretty good place to be overall in this wide receiver class. Over the course of the offseason here, we're going to talk more running backs. We're going to talk more quarterbacks. I know the wide receivers took over this episode a little bit. Any player that I didn't break down, you want to hear about it, put it in the episode description. Make sure you're subscribed because there is going to be plenty more content previewing this 2026 class and beyond before we even get to the season. And then you better believe a whole lot more once the season gets going. So make sure you're subscribed. I appreciate you checking out this episode, and we're going to be back real soon with some more fantasy football breakdown.